Well, hello everyone. Here to show you the eye-to-eye attention it is. So far as eye-to-eye attention, and knowing about that this is a coloring activity that I went ahead and did is talking about. Say with the eyes, it is talking about is that this was a story, of course, from whenever, of course, I was in school. It was, and a lot of times with the with any kids or with anybody that knowing about if they're going to be in school, it is knowing about that being in the classroom like with all the other kids it is, and knowing about that with most teachers were probably thinking about that if their students will maybe want to well, think that maybe if any of their students would want their attention for any reason it is such as if it's like what you call showing them something, if it's show and tell, or if it's anything maybe related to like maybe finger painting it is, or something like that. But basically this story right here is talking about is one time whenever it was basically about say a teacher it was is that one of my teachers, of course, that a couple of them that I had of course in grade school was, and it known about a couple of them of course were had blondish brown hair. A few of them had like what you call is like brownish hair, and of course when you say blondish hair it is of course tannish hair, and a few of them were pretty nice it was. And then I remember one teacher of course that was pretty nice it was, and knowing about a lot of times is that with the children though that a lot of times if a lot of times that we can remember that if we had a question about something, or if we want to talk to the teacher about something, a lot of times the rule was is you raise your hand, and then the teacher would call you and to mention something of course to the class it is. And a lot of times that they would call you and you say ask you to raise your hand it is. But basically that you see right here is that I went ahead and drew like what's called the detail right here is like for the eyes it is. And knowing about with me though a couple of times that if there was something going on in the classroom it was that I'm sure anybody probably think about that there was a lot of things going on in the classroom that more likely that you were trying to get the teacher's attention about, but then because she kept getting busy on something else, and then knowing about it seemed like maybe she was ignoring you, was you were trying to get her attention somehow. And then knowing about that that later on that you were doing your schoolwork, she was giving you work to do it was, and that I had a teacher, there was a teacher that was looking at me kind of like this right here, to say with her hand, you say with her, I guess it would be her right arm, that would she would be resting up against her cheeks it was, and knowing about that she would be looking at me. And this one time whenever I was in class it was that she would be looking at me, and knowing about she would kind of give me this look right like this right here of knowing about it's like, you okay, like what's wrong. And the way she looked at me a couple of times, a few teachers that knowing about say the eye to eye type look it is right here is here's the two eyes. And knowing about with most teachers though that whenever they look at you it is, and at the time be wondering about that whenever they're looking at you, if they're just what you call just looking at you because maybe they're wondering about how you're doing, about it's like how come that I asked you a question it is, how come you're not answering it is. But on the other hand too, that knowing about that this type of attention of course is a lot of times it's like what I liked quite a bit of course about being in school was is knowing about, because a lot of times that if I would be talking to a teacher, if I would be talking even to the classmates about something, and then the next thing you know it's like so far as attention is talking about is it what you call is like for hearing for what who has to say, for what who has to say. In a lot of ways though that I remember that the schoolwork of course that she gave me of course was practicing of course about spelling, say for J and J, and then that G for G it is, and then that maybe H for H, and say K for K, and then of course C for C, and so on and so on. and they say try practicing to say the letters of the alphabet. But I can remember that one a couple of times that the teachers would give you work to do, and a couple of times that I remember. One year it was that that 1 year I'm just what you call working with different colors here, but it's like talking about say with the blue. We'll go ahead and maybe add some blue right here for the shirt, but for the gown that the teacher will be wearing it is. But 1 year that I can remember that the teacher, it's like I kept looking at her and she would look at me and she was like, the answers are not written on my face, they're written on the paper. And so I can remember a couple of times the teachers would say that, like that so far as attention of knowing about, is it talking about feedback? A lot of times anybody, I guess would say that about, feedback it is. So far as, eye-to-eye attention it is knowing about whenever I was in school, it was that if I, wanted to say something, it was a lot of times it seemed like that the teachers or whoever, maybe the classmates would always be like, huh, what? Like, what does that have to do with it? Or something like that. I remember, right, that some of the students, of course, in the classroom, it seemed like a lot of times that whatever I would say or mention, every once in a while that they may say, well, good idea, man, or say good thinking. But then a couple of them that may say that, huh, what? And if you were to maybe call out an answer, then more likely that they may say, like that, it's like, and then somebody else, of course, calls out an answer or says something, and it's like, half the time it seems like, seems like half the time don't really get no credit or say don't get any points, for mentioning this or that. But on the other hand, too, in a lot of ways, it's like so far as eye contact, that a lot of ways that anybody may be thinking about whenever somebody looks at me, it's like, eye to eye, I begin to start laughing. It is in a lot of ways. I guess it's a habit, of course, I picked up, of course, from school, was of knowing about whenever I start laughing that I don't even know what they're thinking whenever they look at me. If they're looking at me as like, well, what are you talking about? Or, huh? Like, well, it's, I don't know. I'm like, why are you asking me? Or something like that. But the way that they looked at, a lot of times the teachers would say to you, and of course the way they looked at you, but on your hand too, whenever the teacher would look at me and of course turn around and look at another student, it was like that you were trying to get their attention earlier, and all of a sudden it was like that they kept paying attention to something else. It was, and that knowing about that at the time that anybody may be thinking about that maybe if you could have walked up to them or said something about it. But the way I would think about it with teachers, though, that with most of the time whenever we're in school, it is knowing about, say, with the type of intention that more likely the students need, is like all depend on, say, the teacher it is. And knowing about with me, though, that maybe I could have thought about, maybe trying to get the teacher's attention those couple of times. Anybody probably think about whenever you're young, it is a young kid that a lot of times that it's like that yep, reading and writing, of course, is not really your thing. And a lot of times anybody probably think about that, you just don't know if it's your thing or not. At least just try it. And of course you have to have so many hours and skills and say training, of course, just to know about, if you want to go ahead and learn that or not. It is. But alright, and that is talking about, say, from eye to eye attention. It is basically talking about, say, the number of counts, and so far as eye to eye contact, it is of knowing about that whenever the teacher looks at me and I will look at them, it is that they would look at me for a few seconds and then turn around and look at another student. And a lot of times it was like that, sometimes she would look at me, it's like, what's wrong, you okay? Well, what's, it's like you're just sitting there. You're not writing down the answer. It is. It's like you're like, and you need to go nurse or anything like that. If I can remember, like a couple of them did not even bother to ask. If I was all right. It is. But on the other hand, too, that knowing about with like eye to eye contact, it is of knowing about that. In a lot of ways that with the type of attention it is, and anybody maybe think about the way I think the truth is that knowing about is that it's like. To like all students, it is that that with the teachers though that they are there, of course, you say for support, and of course also to teach your kids, of course, the basics, of course, and things that they need to know, of course, for the class, for whenever you're in class. And at the time, it may seem like the kids think that maybe the teachers maybe are ignoring them in some way. And by ignoring them is by, like, if there was a problem in class, or if there was a fact about, maybe if some teachers may say about if there was a problem to where somebody was copying off of somebody else's schoolwork, or if they cheated on a test, whichever it is. But on the other hand, to talk about, say, eye-to-eye contact, it is knowing about in a lot of ways. It was like that, knowing about, whenever the teacher looks at me, a lot of times it seems like they are, wondering about how I'm doing and want to know what I was wanting to say. And then talk about that, it's like, well, let me know if you got any questions, it is. But other than that, like talking about, it's like, let me know how you're doing. But other than that they talk about right here is so far as eye-to-eye attention, you're talking about, say, with the school activity.